Welcome to A Brush with Color, Week 3 watercolor painting. My name is Charlene and I'll be taking you through this class exercise. This week it's all about fruit and we're starting with a pear for painting 1. We'll be working on our wet on wet technique, mixing colors right on the page and shadows, all of which you've learned and done before, but this time it's going to be on steroids. Remember to start and stop this video as you need, or you can slow down, speed up on YouTube, whatever works best for you. Let's see what tools we need. We have our reference photo. We have the image that we've traced onto our book. We have our kneaded eraser, our brush, our palette that has the paints, also known as pigments, on there. And if you remember last week's class, we have 3 primary colors, red, yellow, blue. Plus we have neutral and 3 secondary colors, which are violet, green, and burnt orange. We have our brush, of course, our water container, our spritzer bottle, and our paper towel. Same tools that we use every week. So let's get started. I'm going to use the kneaded eraser to lighten up my tracing lines. And you see, I got a new eraser. The other one was drying out. So you really have to be careful that you wrap this in saran wrap or keep it in a special container so it doesn't dry out. And again, we're going to either brush along the lines or you can roll it on your drawing to lighten the lines. And again, sometimes you want lines, sometimes you don't. You have to be careful not to erase them too far or you won't see them. And in this case, we have a lot of dotted lines in the middle of our pear, which is about where you can see in the reference photo where the shadows, the different greens, the different yellows, reds, oranges will show. And it also indicates where reflection will be in your pear. So here it is here and along here. And the best way that we can possibly do that reflection is to do our best to keep those areas without any paint on them. So let's start with wet on wet. We've got, just going to go around the entire pear. You can probably hear some barking out there. We have a lot of dogs in our neighborhood. Lots of neighborhood dogs. They're all very friendly, but they talk a lot. Okay, so I'm just putting water, and you don't want too much water because that'll cause you a problem when you add more colors, because they won't actually be able to blend properly. They'll just kind of splatter all over. And I'm looking over here, and what I should have done was kept that little space here without any water here. So I'm drying my brush and kind of cleaning that off. We can lift that color out later anyway. Okay, and I want to make sure that the whole, oops. Yeah, see, I've got some areas that aren't wet. When you tilt your page, you can see if you've covered all the areas that you want. Okay, I got lots of water on there, but not too much. And I'm going to activate my colors. And what we're going to start with on this pear, you can see there's a lot of yellow on this pear. And we're going to just paint the entire thing, except a couple of areas using our Hansa yellow medium. So I'm going to activate it using my spray bottle, and then using the brush get a wet puddle going here on the bottom, and I'm going to just take from the edge of the pigment and bring that into the puddle. Okay, so here we go. Just painting around the entire pear. move this yellow over here so it's closer. Oops. And then I want a little bit of a reflection up here, and I want some reflection down here. Just going to dab my paint. You can see this one, when we were painting the flowers, we were mostly using the tip of our brush, but this one, this has a larger area to cover. So we're just going to cover this entire space, often using the belly of our brush. So there we go. Gonna clean off the brush. Now, let's see. Let's do a little bit of, let's do some of the light green. So a good idea is because our undersea green is fairly dark, let's activate that. Activate the orange at the same time, maybe a little itty bitty red, just so it's ready when we're ready. I'm gonna mix this undersea green with the yellow. Just grabbing pigment right from the edge and mixing that in the puddle. Clean off the brush and then go to this yellow and let's mix this yellow. Let's grab some of this yellow and mix it into our green so we have a nice yellow, nice bright green. Don't want it to be dark, not our first layer anyway. We're working in layers. Okay, I'm just gonna pull this right in there like that. Okay, so let's work with this layer. You can see my page is kind of tilted, so I'm getting a bit of a puddle on the edge here. So you always want to just watch what's going on with your book. Sometimes if it's buckling, you need to take a clip and clip it down so that it doesn't flip around. So I'm going to do around this edge here. I'm going to go around and in here to create that color shape, because it's all about shapes that we're creating here. So we'll start right at the very tip. See, that's a lot. That's a very watery. I have a very watery consistency, and it's a bit much because it's wet on wet. You don't want too much of that, of water. We're putting it into water, so we want to just kind of, here's where I'm going to use the tip of my brush to go around. See, and you've got these dots, this line in here. We're going to pull this, put this green coming in here. And this green is blending into the yellow on the page. So it's just a nice light. See how it just kind of mixes right in there. We don't have to rub it or move it too much. It's actually going where we want it to go. And we're going to go all the way around here. Pick up some more pigment, some of that green yellow. Whew, pretty pigment. I love this. See how I'm just dabbing this in here. I'm going to go all the way around, and it's going to stick within the borders of where I put the water. Around here. I've got some yellow in here, so I'm just not going to put too much. We can always lift it again. And this is very dark, so we'll be coming back in that and putting some very dark pigment in there, or darker pigment, that darker green. I'm going to go around here, grab some more pigment. Come up here. Yeah, that is so pretty. Okay, I'm just going to come back and put a little bit more around here. Dabba dabba do ya, a little dabba do ya. That is really, really nice. And again, my paper is buckling for some reason. Doesn't usually do that, but I'm going to just work that. Now, when you're working on wet, you do have to work pretty fast because it'll dry and then it's harder to blend. And I'm going to wipe through this here because pick up the puddle in the middle and going to move to the yellow orange. And remember, we did a really pretty, this burnt orange is really pretty. Let's mix some yellow in with that as well. See how that comes out. Ooh, that's nice. I like that a lot. In this area here, we don't want it to be too aggressively orange. It's more like more of a shadowy orange. So I'm just going to put it in here. Then we've got that space that we need to leave open as a reflection. I'm going to go down the middle here. And I'm going to go right around this area here. Look at that. Just take it around the edges. Yes. Take it around the edges. And see how it's blending in. I'm going to leave this area clear. And even though you leave an area clear, you know that often the paint is going to bleed right into that. And so all you're going to do is we'll lift it up later. Isn't that pretty? Look at, see how it just blends. See how that green has gone in, and then our orangey yellow is really made a nice variation in color and texture. Woo! I love that. And again, I've got this puddle here that's creating just a excess water puddle. I'm just gonna dry my brush and pick up that excess water. Okay, now let's see if there's, yeah, I'm just gonna keep this little space open where we like to see that reflection. And then this one here, just keep that space open. And if the paint comes back in there, we will lift it again. All right, now I'm gonna do the red. I'm going to mix a little bit of the burnt orange with my red. Clean off the brush, dry and clean off the brush so I don't contaminate my burnt orange. Grab some pigment, mix that up. Yeah, that looks nice. That red is just a little too, I'll call it hot. Yeah, that's pretty. Okay, and now I'm going to go back in, and I'm working on this area here, my reference. You'll notice I'm really focused on my reference photo this time, just to make sure that I'm on track. And also you can see that the colors really soak into the water. Let's see. Oh, look at that. We still have enough water in there. It's still damp enough that we can just put some of this red, orange into our wet paper. We're going to bring it down along here. And I'm just dabbing. Not brushing it because I want the water to take it where it wants to take it. But I'm also dabbing it strategically so that my colors will be where I want them to be. Okay, I'm going to take some more of this red-orange pigment, and I'm going to work along this part here. Just a wee bit in there. That might be a little much. That's okay. I'm going to just take our brush, tip tap on that centerpiece. Maybe take those little veins. You see how sometimes it goes out and it creates all these veins? Just want to release some of those and smooth those in. Got a little bit of red coming down dripping down the side here, and we really do want that to be more of a green in here, but we'll come back and just lifting out. If your colors are bleeding too far down to where you don't want them, just come back with your brush, your clean, dry or damp brush, and just move them around. Yeah, because this one, see how this one is going this way. So we're really trying to create that illusion of a circular reflection and the different colors. Grab that undersea green. Let's see, we're going to use that for the shadows up top, the darker. Let's see how that's looking. Yes. Just go around the edge. I'm going to just go around the edge. And then we've got this section here where we're pulling it in to create, again, that illusion of that depth of the pear. So I'm going to just pull this in here like this. Comes across. And now you may not be able to see any of your dotted lines or anything, so you're really going to be moving this by eye, referring to your reference photo, going around and around. I still quite damp. Use the tip of your brush to just kind of move that along. Notice there's a little bit of a yellow or a lighter color along the edge here, so we can leave that open for the time being. And remember, you can always come back, and when you come back to it tomorrow if you want, and just work on it and add the bits that you might have missed. So we're coming around here, the darker, and we're going to come back after it's dried a bit. We're in a hurry because we don't want our paper to dry, but really, don't rush yourself. We can always start again. That's the exciting thing about doing this, is that it's just paper, paint, and water. So you certainly got more paper, and you've got more paint, and you've got more water. I'm not liking how this goes straight across because that gives it a different look. So I'm just going to go down around in here, bring a little bit more of that darker pigment, and sit back for a second and take a look at where you're at and how your red may have bled in. And you need a little bit more value in this area with your red. Now this here, whoop! My brush is playing acrobatics with me. Just again, I'm going to do a little bit of, put a little bit more of that reddy orange and just put a little bit more value in there. It needs to dry a bit before we go back on that. Okay, I'm really liking that. Again, pay attention to where your reflections, those light reflections are. I'm going to lift those out, that we have that view of illusion of light coming at it. Now in this case, light is coming from the right. You can see that by where the shadow is, because it's from the right and it's going down. So the shadow is below the actual top of the fruit. So as it comes in, it lightens the closest part of the fruit to it, and it's darkening the furthest part of where the fruit is. So while we're letting this dry, And we want to be very careful about blending into our pear, the paints that we've already painted. I'm going to just see how those edges feel. I'm going to just put a little itty bitty bit of water in here. And the way I like to do brown is to take our burnt orange and mix it with a bit of neutral. I haven't used neutral yet. Neutral, the great thing about neutral is that you can mix it with any color and it'll just make that color darker. It won't change the color, it'll just make it darker. So let's see what happens when we mix our neutral. Looks black, but if you use it on its own, it will be a brighter black. If you use black water paints, they tend to be very dull. So I'm going to take some fairly high pigment and move it into here. And look at that. Just turns that burnt orange into a dark burnt orange, which in effect is brown. Now, if you're not comfortable with it, go on to your other side of your page and test it. Remember, use your book to test. I'm going to put a little bit more of that burnt orange in there. And then I'm going to try it again. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. A little bit stronger in the orange and less in the neutral. Oh, yes. And we're going to run that down our stem. Just let it, see how I've gone underneath the stem just a bit to give it a little bit of dimension. Just going to let this sit in for a while and then I'll come back at it. As you can see, there's darker and then lighter. If you just put the base down, let that dry a bit, we can come back and play with that. Let's work on the shadow. Clean off my brush like I'm supposed to. Get some water on there. You don't want too much, not as much as we put on the pear. We're going to come back to this, so don't worry about how it looks for the time being. Do some of this, clean this off so I have a space for my petal. You can see that looks like a dark blue, light dark blue. So again, I'm going to make my petal. And I don't want it to be too bright of a blue. So I'm going to go back to that neutral we talked about. Get a little bit of that neutral and put it in here and see, it'll make it a nice darker blue. And you'll see by the shadow is the darkest right at the edge along the pear and the bottom. So the edge and bottom, remember the light's coming this way, so it's coming down on the pear. So this is going to be the darkest area. And then it lightens up as we go. So let's go along the edge here. I have a lot of glare on my reference photo. I hope that it doesn't glare in the video. So let's just put this along. This beautiful blue, dark blue. It's almost an indigo, but not quite. We're just going to put this, the darker of it, along here. So we really need to consider where that light is so that we can imagine how that pear is sitting on the table and how that light is going to change the dimensions and the values. So I put a darker bit here and then got some water on my brush, and I'm just pulling same paint that I laid down at first over to the left, because that will reduce the value, but it will also make it look like it's smooth. So should take away that hard line. My stem, for some reason, has less space in here. And I'm not sure if that's because of the way my drawing was, or if I messed up the drawing, the tracing. Seems like a fairly major mistake though if I did that. Okay. We'll come back a little bit and put a little bit more in there too. But in the meantime, I think that's looking pretty good. Okay, let's move back to our stem. And we're just gonna do wet on dry. And we're gonna use our orangey brown, make it a little bit orangier. And come in here and just see, we've got the wash. We pretty much created a wash. So whatever we paint over top of that, you'll have a light brown that will show through. So we can use the reference photo and see that it's lighter and we've got a streak that goes through. So we'll just paint around that. We'll paint that into the painting rather than let the paint flow and do its thing, because we can't be sure it's going to do that. So we'll just use our paints. That looks nice. And I'm going to take just a wee bit of neutral and pull that in there. And remember, the way the light's going, the darker should be on this edge. That looks good. That'll look nice when it's all done. Ooh, that shadow's looking pretty good the way it is. We'll darken that up because we need to darken the green up, and we'll darken the edge up. But in general, it looks pretty good. Let's see. We're going to work again on our colors to bring that vibrancy in. So we've got a lot of great background in there, and we just want to do some vibrancy. So again, let's look at the green, the darker green. Not sure if you can see that. Sorry. Don't want it too wet. And I'm going to come around again, and I'm going to put some more color in there, just some more value. So you'll see we've got some, layers that we're creating. That darker is left over here. We've got the yellow. We've got some of that lighter green we used. Primarily the tip of my brush because I don't want to put too much paint down. I'm going to dry off my brush, and I'm just going to kind of soften what I put down with the belly of my brush. See how I'm doing that? It's just adding a really nice soft tone. This paper is really soaking in the pigment. So that's why I've come back on these layers a few times. I'm going to do some more pigment, just a little wee bit of pigment here. Definitely in here. Got this red, we need to pick that up a little bit more. Red and the burnt orange. We like that a lot. Clean my brush, wet and clean my brush, dry it off. Give me a little bit more water for that pigment and pull it over into the red to make a nice reddy burnt orange. Here's where that dip is right here, and then I just went down, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch or so just to add that again. Pulled that in, just following along. Okay, that looks good. Just let this sit for a bit. I think that's looking good. Oh, just a wee bit more. I'm going to use the belly of my brush to scrape, almost scrape it along the inner part of that circle, of that reflection. I don't want to put a lot of paint in there. I just want a little dabadooya on there just to add some. I'm going to do that in a circular motion. Just go around and maybe mix in a bit of that green. There you go. And come back to this and soften those lines up. So that means we're going to wet the brush, dry the... Okay, before I do that, I'm going to definitely change my paper towel. Paper towel change. Okay, wet, dry, and then I'm gonna just soften. Ah, yes, look at that. Woo! Soften that up while it's still damp. Don't really want any hard lines. That is really pretty. Now we seem to have lost some of that white that highlight. And down here, it went a little far. So I'm gonna just take that, soften that up a bit. Nice job. Woo! This is kind of bugging me. We've got this dark piece here. We've got a dark here and a dark there. And it's not bugging me in a bad way. It's just reminding me that I have a darker little bit that will help define the curves. See how that is like a curve, right? And this one's a curve. So it's helping us to define. And this is drier now, much drier. So I'm just going to do that in a full-on strong value of the green. So it will really help us to, again, define the curve. Ooh, I like that a lot. Good job, team. You can see there's this shadow in here along the red. It's quite dark. So that's something I'm going to come back to. And I'm going to use the blue. Believe it or not, I'm going to use that dark blue that we created. So we want to make this just a wee bit darker. I'm going to get that pigment, but I'm going to dilute it so it's not as dark. And again, come through here, make this a little bit lighter. There's some streaks in this. It's not all completely one color. So you can really play around a little bit with your pigment and your brush. It's looking good. Are you excited? I sure am. I love it when the paintings start to come together. Okay, so this line is a bit hard and it's dried, so I'm just cleaning my brush, wetting it, leaving a little bit of dampness to it, and just brushing it like this. And if you feel like you don't have enough yellow, well then, by golly, go back and get your yellow and do a little itty-bitty dabba-doo-ya right into here. I put a little too much water on there, and I'm not happy with this hard line. And I'm going to take that clean, damp brush, and I'm just going to go like this on here. That worked out pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with that. I hope you're happy with yours too. I bet you yours is better than mine. Absolutely. Now, remember I was talking about that blue. I just want to use that darker blue that I made with the cobalt, or no, this is the ultramarine blue, and I mixed just a wee bit of neutral, and I'm just going to come down along here to make a shadow. These two that I put here seem a little bit dark. I'm just going to lighten those up a little wee bit with my brush. Yeah, there we go. That way they look like they belong. Nicely done. Nicely done. Okay, we're going to use that side brush technique for the table. See how the table has some shadows again. We've got the shadows from the pear with the light coming down. Then we've got a lighter bit of the table and then the darker. So we're going to play around with that. And we're going to use the side of our brush to create the table to start with, because you can see it's not just a flat wash. It has texture, it has dimension. So you drew a line here, which is that big shadow right here, the darker shadow. But we're gonna just paint this whole bit, the table bit first, and then come back. So this will be a good use of your big brush. And this is a brown table, so let's go and clean off the blobs in our palette so that we can make a nice puddle of that brown. And we're going to play around with that color too, because we'll add a little light and then we'll make it a bit darker as we go. So we want to start with the rule of light to dark. So let's use our burnt orange, do a nice puddle, and mix just a bit of our neutral in with that. Okay, it's not too dark. It's got a nice, still has that brightness of the burnt orange. And we're just going to, on dry, you might want to practice this first on the side. We're going to take the belly of our brush and we're just going to go along like this, and it will pick up the pigment on the texture of the paper. So fill the belly. You don't want too much though, because then you have just a straight paint. Okay, and I'm just gonna go across like this. See how I'm creating just some texture with it. And you've got some white streaks that are left in the page. I'm gonna make sure that the top part is full. See how I just did that texture along there, right? It's kind of cool. We can come back to that and add more or less or whatever we want. Let's now work on that shadow that comes from under the pear and goes all the way across, that darker shadow. So we're going to need a darker pigment, a darker brown. We really don't want it to be the exact same color as the blue shadow. We want it to have some contrast. So we're going to take some of that neutral. Ooh, that's nice. And we're going to paint that. Are we happy with that brown? Yes, we are. We just want to make sure this is somewhat dry. We're going to go under the pear, and it's going to come up. Anything that's sitting on a flat surface, the shadow underneath it will anchor it. If not, it feels like it's floating up into the sky. See, look at how it adds a nice dimension. And if you feel that maybe that's not enough, you can add some more paint, and you can even make it go down a little bit more. That makes you feel a little more anchored. That's up to you. Then I'm going to take just a wee bit I'm going to water this down a bit, and then I'm going to do a bit more of that across on my table using the belly of my brush. Woo! That looks great. See, we did some mixing of paints right on the paper, and we did mixing of new paints that we hadn't done before on the palette, like using our neutral. That gives you so many more opportunities and options of how you're going to paint your paintings. Let's see what's going on here. Try not to overwork your painting, especially with stuff like this, because you can find that you're actually wearing down your paper and you end up with a hole in your paper. Now, our final bit is the wash, and that's this across here. And I'm going to take a brush that you were given in class, the larger one, and I'm going to swap out my water and think about what color am I going to put in the background. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to do a bluey purpley color. Before I can do that, I need to make space in my palette for a puddle of the color that I want for my background. And see, I'm not wiping up the blobs, I'm just wiping up the excess paint that I don't think I'm going to be using later, and getting myself another paper towel. Or Shelley brought us these really wonderful towels, micro towels, that I'm going to use right now. And the micro towel you can use in place of the paper towel and just throw it in the wash. Okay, so this is going to be a wash. And you might recall when we did our wash, we were talking about the bead, right? So we're going to focus on that. But before we do that, I'm going to make my color. Let's start with the blue. And instead of darkening it up with the neutral, I'm going to use some of the purple and see what happens. Ooh, we're going to want it to be fairly light. Be pulling in that purple, so it's going to be like a purple. And I'm going to test that on here and see what that looks like. That's way too dark. We want to change the value. We change it with water. We want to lighten the value with more water. So we dab it. That looks nice too. We just want, okay, that's it. So we need to wet our brush, put it in the paint, dab it on the towel. Okay, but first, I'm going to use my bigger brush and I'm going to wet the paper. And the thing with this one is that we have to work around the object we've already painted. So there is another option of how to paint this. The other option is to paint the wash first and then paint the rest of your painting over top of it. And that'll make sure that you don't smear your lines or bleed into the main object. I would do that on the second one, not on the first one. This is a good exercise. This one has a bit darker on this side, but here's one that I did that's just a flat wash across. Okay, we've done our color. We want lots of water in there because we don't want it to take over the painting. This is a background. So let's see, there we go. We just go across very lightly with the belly of your brush. And remember, all of this dries lighter. So even though it looks like it might be a bit dark, don't worry because it will fade. There's a little darker. That's when I mentioned that this side is just a wee bit darker because of the light. Beautiful. We're done. There's two things we have to do. We need to sign it, date it, hang it on the wall, and give yourself a huge round of applause. Well done. The next video is for homework, and we're going to be painting lemons.